Hello, I'm David Hunt and welcome to The Art Hunter. What has a cocktail maker got to do with art? Why am I talking to these people? What is like a bird, like this bird of some description? Well, you might get to that a little bit later. Okay, so it's two people. We're doing an interview with him. Person one, let's call him Jeremy. Artist, performer, director, and has done so much more. His work and his research is absolutely amazing. For 25 years, so he must be really young. 10 years in Paris, as you do. We've all done that at some stage, and we'll get to that a little bit later. He actually questions what theatre plays are socially about today. Is he, like experimenting here? Maybe he is. Maybe that's got something to do with the cocktail making. And let's go to person two. Now, person two, we'll call him Jack. Jack is an actor, theatre maker, and committed to developing unique theatre and unique experiences. Graduating from WAPA over in Perth, and has a degree in musical theatre. I've got 3 of them, but so he's got nothing on me. And award-winning musical from Perth Fringe. So let's meet these people that I'm calling Jeremy and Jack. Hello.
Hello,
Very
Hello,
nice
David.
to meet
Thank you
you
for having us.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure. All right, Jeremy, you're on.
Okay.
Give us a background. How did it all start for you? Like as a performer, a theatre person, like in so many ways, and you've achieved so much.
How did it begin? I at school I did a lot of drama, and I had I think probably I began in the body. Let's go right back. I come from a sporting family. My mum and dad met through skiing in Canada. I was born in Canada, and
well, you must have been here a long time because you don't have an accent at all.
I don't have a Canadian accent. I still use some terms from Canada. Like I still say sweater rather than jumper, and I say certain things. But no, I've been here since we moved here with my mother when I was 7.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you went to school here. That's where you learned.
All my education was in Australia. Yeah. Dad always remained there, but back and forth. But,
okay.
But that work with the body, one of those things in life where you look back, that work with the body began very young, and I actually kind of feel, in terms of the way in which I work with performers today, you can really tell a performer that has a sports background or athletic background or dance background, partly not necessarily just to do with the kind of their coordination in their body, but also their rigor, their discipline, their willingness to kind of get up again and try again.
Yeah, push them.
Recognizing that it takes time to achieve something. Yep. So when I moved to Australia, I started as a gymnast. That transitioned into contemporary dance in my later years at high school, and there was always this question as to whether I pursue contemporary dance or theatre. And then, strangely enough, I ended up at art school doing visual art. so then it all kind of pulls back together. Like over the course of my life, all of those strands, I think, have ended up weaving together. But I did have a really great English teacher / drama teacher, and I was part of the drama club at my school in Canberra. And in grade 8 we did The Crucible, and The Crucible was on the HSC list.
Whoa!
And we were an all-boys school, and all the young boys, we all played the girls.
And very Shakespeare of you.
Yeah. I mean, it was a bit twisted, the whole thing, actually, looking back, because the 2 leads, Abigail and Elizabeth Warren, were played by female teachers. With the year 12 boys playing John Proctor, it was quite, and we ended up touring to the schools in Sydney, to the boys' schools in Sydney. Yeah, because it was on the HSC, and we were hammered. We had spitballs thrown at us. It's amazing that I stayed wanting to do theatre because it was so humiliating. But maybe that started to build a resilience, because you need a resilience in this industry.
You certainly do. Tell us about Paris. What did you get up to there? Fascinating.
So Paris was moving to work with Ariane Mushkin and the Théâtre du Soleil, but really a lot of the training and work that I have done comes out and stems from the Lecoq School in Paris. And so even in London, companies like Théâtre de Complicité, they all come from that tradition. And
what is that tradition? Tell our
that
viewers.
tradition is Lecoq began a 2-year training, an intensive 2-year training in the 50s, and really for him, I mean, what I have always admired as from his position as a pedagogue, because he really ended up focusing. He directed some work, but he really pushed pedagogy. What is pedagogy in theatre? And he also came from a sports background, and so it was always questioning the body first. And so he really, it's since he was known before his death, but I think in years to come he will be alongside Stanislavski as one of the biggest influences on the way in which we make and teach theatre.
Wow, okay. So it must have been documented along the way.
Yes, and increasingly so.
So, right, reflecting
the legacy
on
is increasingly
Yeah.
so. So it's very
Brilliant.
much coming from the body. It follows certain traditions that he then kind of questioned in terms of masked play, from commedia dell'arte to using the neutral mask. He really developed the neutral mask as a training tool, which many drama schools, and which is something in my pedagogy that I really have as a foundation to research, because it's about pure training. It's not a performance mask. It's just about exposing the actor's body, because when I put this neutral mask on you, your body becomes very apparent. And so the story your body is telling in space is as important as we often get seduced by the face. And so it's trying to align the actors, what they think their body is transmitting, what the muscle of the body is transmitting, what the breath is transmitting, as much as relying on what words you're saying.
Yeah, because that's true in life as well, because we think that we portray something, but what other people see is very different, because it's all about the whole body, isn't it?
Exactly. And in life, that's the complexity of life, but in theatre as an art form, the actor needs to try and align their understanding of what they're manipulating to the public. I mean, ultimately, we are manipulating the public, their emotions, their ways of seeing. So we need to study and I think that's where my visual art training assisted a lot in terms of teaching ways of seeing and body in space and an understanding of that. So anyway, back to Paris, it was kind of, Ariane stems from, she was one of the earliest students in the Lecoq School in the 1950s. And at a very young age, like at 23, she started the Théâtre du Soleil as a large collective with a group of students at that point. But it's become probably one of the most influential ensemble companies in Europe and probably internationally.
How lucky to be part of that.
Yeah, very special time. I think we don't have a culture of working with masters in Australia. And it's certainly something probably I was always a bit cynical toward. But there is something to work with someone who is considered to be a master. And for, in Ariane, she's probably one of the only women of that generation. Ariane's now 84 and still making.
Oh, brilliant.
Still making.
Brilliant.
So there's something very special to be part of a legacy. Kind of recognizing that we're all part of a tradition.
Now, you like pushing the boundaries in so many ways, and it probably stemmed from that era. What is it that you like to sort of think, where can I go now? What can I do now? And your mind must be thinking along those lines a lot, is it?
Yeah, I think as an artist, I think there may be two forms of being an artist. There's the painter that really works on the interior, and in some ways maybe doesn't even care how those works are received. I think a lot of contemporary painting, say modern painting from the American tradition of Rothko, and a lot of interior research. I don't know if they put out manifestos often, but they didn't necessarily. The work goes on the wall, and how you receive it, or that's up to you. It's a bit polemic, probably what I said there, but
but also because I'm just going to jump in there, because you like to paint as well, don't you?
Yeah, I certainly carry through a tradition, and I think if I had more time, I would be doing more visual art projects than I do. But it's hard to navigate all of those. But I think the act of sketching, the act of making a collage, is again just an act of training the eye. And so that then facilitates us in the work we do in theatre, because when I'm working with a performer or with a group of performers, really I'm painting a stage. It's just live, but I have to be conscious of each gesture, each movement within within the composition.
And what's going on lighting and scenery wise and all that? More so lighting with what you do, I assume, these days a lot of the time.
Yeah. Probably because I love the work of Caravaggio.
Hey, brilliant.
No, I think, yes, I almost feel, again, this is maybe stemming from a kind of Lecoq tradition, and the tradition even with Ariane. Every work begins with nothing. We just start with an idea and we develop from there. And so in terms of anything that would be linked to a stage design, it stems from the work of the actor, rather than actors being put into a space and into a stage design that's been designed almost in abstraction away from them.
Yep.
Usually in the tradition I come from, it starts from the work of the actor and director, and what we need to use to assist that, we will then apply it in layers, whether that's sound or light or some architecture. But not often in Australia it works in the reverse. It's kind of the director and stage designer have had meetings for months before. Many questions are already answered, and the actors come in the last 6 weeks, and they're kind of put into, this is where you are, this is the transposition.
All right, so we'll hold it there because it's leading, obviously, to
where we
to where we're going. Jack,
Yes.
hello.
Hello.
And give us your background.
Okay, I am originally from a little country town in the Riverina in New South Wales called Leeton. It's a very small irrigation area. And so there's always this question of kind of how did you get into the arts and performance? I love to blame the Wiggles. I watched a lot of Wiggles growing up and always just loved singing and dancing and performing. And I was very lucky that I had some supportive parents through... I did a kind of local musical of Oliver Twist in Year 7 and had some very supportive, influential teachers as well that pushed me to start singing, dancing, and kind of acting lessons. So I worked a lot through high school, basically with the goal of getting into WAPA. I moved out of home.
Because that was pretty much the premium musical theatre school at the time, or university at the time, where now, Melbourne's got one, but the amount of people, musical theatre, that come out of WAPA.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my really only exposures to a lot of theatre, growing up rurally, was to come to Melbourne or Sydney and see many of the big musicals, and you don't have to look far in the programs to just see WAPA.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of was always the ideal in a sense, or the goal. And as I said, I had some very supportive parents and teachers that really helped me work towards that. So I got in out of high school and went over to Perth when I was 18. I completed my Bachelor of Musical Theatre, but of course my third year there was COVID land 2020, and of course we all had our kind of personal arcs, I suppose, over that time, a time of reflection and where do I want to go, what do I want to do, and I had the opportunity to, as you mentioned, kind of work on an original musical with some close friends, and that was really the first opportunity. I'd always been interested in kind of writing and directing and making my own work, but that was the first opportunity that I had to really try it out, and I kind of, fell in love with that in a sense. I love musical theatre as a form, like the opportunity or the ideas to put singing and dancing and acting and text together to tell a kind of larger story is something that I think is incredibly powerful and goes all the way back to ancient Greece and further in theatrical and performance kind of practice. But I wanted to continue exploring and venturing out, so I completed a second Bachelor at WAPA, exploring more devising work, contemporary theatre, performance art, site-specific work, and that kind of blew my mind a little bit and exploded beyond jazz hands and kick lines. And I suspect now, I'm interested in working outside of the theatre, but still incorporating, I suppose, more contemporary versions of those musical aspects of choreography. I guess I'm more interested in contemporary dance and physical theatre, music, contemporary production and experimental electronic music, for example. But and then acting, rather than Stanislavski American acting of a narrative beginning, middle, and end. I'm more interested in exploring verbatim text, community, performance art, and kind of contemporary storytelling.
Okay, so how did the two of you meet up? Like where was it? Do you remember?
It was because of COVID, because I was invited by NIDA to direct a work at the beginning of 2020, and so that had been lined up obviously previous to that, and it just coincided that the flight and everything brought me in just before the border closed, and so coincidentally it was probably better to be back in Australia through that period anyway. And then I was very fortunate because I was going to then go to WAPA to give just a workshop of 2 weeks on my way back to Europe. And they then knew I was stuck in the country. And at the beginning of 21, before everything really started to go pear-shaped on the East Coast, I was very fortunate in that WAPA then asked me to, pretty much all of 2021, I was working across the department which Jack was speaking, which is the devised theatre program, performance making, and then the acting students. And so I was over in Perth. I'd never been to Perth. Perth was never on my radar. And I ended up being in Perth and then stayed. And so I worked with Jack on what was a project, probably the longest project in that course, in that it's about a 6 month
semester.
Yeah, a full semester in their second year. And it's making a solo. So each of the students is to make a solo.
Yep.
And therefore I'm navigating 26 different artists trying to figure out what they do in a solo. And it can be any form. They can go, as Jack said, it could be a verbatim piece, it could be a musical theatre piece, really. They could explore any type or form.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of introducing them to a lot of other artists that work in different forms of solo work. It's really not this is all, what Jack and I are doing is very outside my box in terms of solo. I really, if I had the financing and the thing, I was drawn to the Théâtre du Soleil in Paris because we're a company of 40 actors, a permanent company of 40 actors. And I am very drawn to putting community on stage, and so solo is something that I
But hey, how good.
I'm not closed to it, but yeah.
Now you've got a little ensemble company. What's it called?
Rare Bird Ensemble.
Why Rare Bird? You feel that you're a rare bird?
Why Rare Bird? I think it's one of those awful things when you're trying to search for a name and trying to throw things out there. I think it's again one of those things in retrospect. It was actually a friend, an old friend of mine, who threw the name at me, and we were all searching for names and questioning, what could be representative. And the bird, in the end, the bird really is a very beautiful metaphor. In theatre, it's a beautiful metaphor because
it is.
The birds, they dance, they dance, they sing, they have ritual, they migrate. They, in terms of what Jack and I are particularly interested in is increasingly site-specific work outside the traditional theatre space. So it's kind of nesting. We'll form a nest in these different places. So it's kind of this migration. And so in retrospect, it's one of those things that, actually Rare Bird kind of does speak a lot to what we're doing metaphorically.
I'm really confused, although I'm making this up, but because I know I went along to an artist talk the other week at the Sofitel and cocktail making. What are you doing here? What's are you that desperate for work that you're working as in the cocktail bar at the Sofitel? What's going on?
Yeah, okay. Well, you speak to the cocktails.
Okay. I suppose over in Perth, I work as a cocktail bartender.
Okay.
And it kind of always struck me, I don't know, it is, as Shakespeare, a great man once said, all the world's a stage, and we're all merely players. And
well,
so
and cocktail makers are very
yes,
it's a real performance, isn't it?
exactly. So I was always drawn to the performance, as you might be able to imagine. I can put on a bit of a show behind the bar sometimes, and I think we'd been doing a workshop or something, and anyhow Jeremy came into my bar and kind of saw me put on a bit of a show, and it kind of spurred a conversation about, the bar as a frame, the bar as a stage, the roles and the performance of the bartender, the different roles that they might play in any given night, and how the public and the patrons becomes a kind of complicit audience. And what are they looking for in the bartender? What do they want? What do they need? And the bartender's kind of intuition to read and respond to that is much the same as an actor, a theatre, and really, I don't know, any work of art or any theatrical performance is about creating an experience. People come, we sit in a theatre in the dark and watch a show. A bar is the same thing. The bartender makes an experience.
But the interesting thing about this is it's not scripted as yet, or might not ever be, who knows, because you're developing it. You're developing as you're going along, which I find fascinating, and with the support of the Sofitel as well, and that wonderful man, what's his name?
Clive Scott.
Clive Scott. What an incredible man.
What an incredible
he is.
man. Yeah.
Such a supporter of the arts.
Yeah.
He's giving you the freedom to create this piece.
Yeah. I think, as Jack said, when I saw him behind the bar and saw the frame, of course I've seen that frame before, and of course we see it in cinema and popular culture a lot, and so it works as a frame, but you could replicate that in a theatre and have the audience sit in their seats passively. But I think our interest in the conversations that we started to have were, again, this kind of question of changing the relationship between the artist and the audience. And in some ways, one, taking more risk from our point of view, but by blurring those boundaries between what is fact and fiction, what is real and what is not. I think it's a place where a lot of the audience is going at the moment. I think they're very interested in breaking those boundaries and discovering something more intimate. And I think they really respect artists that take that risk as well. I think they recognize that. And so there's a kind of complicity with the audience in a very different way. And so our conversation that started to lead to questioning this is then I was recalled back. The other organisation that works and has worked with the Sofitel for the entire time that they've been running this artisan residency program is Global Art Projects. And Don Williams, I've known through the visual arts since I had a studio when I graduated from art school and had a studio at the Gunnery Studios up in Sydney in Boorloo, and he was working with the Biennale. And anyway, our conversations had continued all these years. And when I left the Théâtre du Soleil, he had mentioned this residency at the Sofitel. I thought he was then, it's always been visual artists. Anyway, because our proposition, when we had this conversation, I went back to Don and said, Don, the residency, is it still operating? He said, well, because of COVID, it hasn't for the last few years. Do you have something to propose? And I said, well, because he'd said, I think it'd be interesting for you to do something in performance, Jeremy, rather than visual arts. And as I said, I'm not a solo performer, Jack. Don, it's not my thing. So I'd always just had it in the back of my mind, but trying, what will I do? What could I do in a hotel room? Anyway, everything then starts to align. And so I said, well, I have this performer, bartender, etc., and we're starting to discuss a work which I think for us to devise the work, to do it in situ would be extremely spoiling in a way. And so Don then went to Clive and started to have a conversation, and then we put in a formal proposition, which forced us, it's always good to put in a formal proposition because it forces you to really start to articulate what you're planning. And you may veer away from that.
But it also gives you the right, I am on the right track.
Yeah.
This is something worthwhile.
Exactly.
You
start to kind of, things start to fall into place in a way as the dust is settling. And it all moved very quickly. And, Jackie is at the beginning of his career, but for me, I kind of like, wow, it's the difference working with the private sector rather than the public sector, is that things can move very quickly in terms of if they like your proposition, they can make it move forward quite quickly. And so we didn't expect to come at this particular time. We were pushing more toward the end of the year initially because of some other things we were looking at. But it's ended up one of those things about life and how things work, and it's worked out very well. And it is, as you say, it's a very generous offer that the Sofitel gives to artists to be very hands-off. So in terms of us, as you said, doing a devised work where we don't know at this stage how or where it's going to go, to not feel we have to show something at the end of 3 weeks, or but that we've just used this time to go down to the bar, to feel the space, to look at other bars in the city, to it's been a bit of a cocktail trail, to interview some bartenders from other bars, to just use it as a very solid period of research and investigation, and the beginning of testing, because we have quite a large room, like a suite, and
it swings around. You're talking about where you
So in our suite, we have shifted all the furniture, and we have a studio.
Oh, okay.
And so we take some of the research into physical work and starting to explore text and think, what you're saying. From these interviews we've had from other texts, we spent a lot of time at the State Library, just dragging out historical texts from bar culture, the sociology of bars. We don't want it to be about bars, but of course the Sofitel, Clive, one of his initial response was, I love the proposition because it speaks to the hospitality industry and to what we do. And because basically what we are doing, in terms of what Jack said, is drawing from popular culture. The bartender has been very present in popular culture, and kind of, in my mind, stems back to kind of Shakespeare's Fools. In this secondary character that often is in theatre, in cinema, and literature is often unnamed. We're giving them a certain agency. We're making them kind of visible in a way that we're also, in some ways, exposing some of the mechanics of the relationship even between the public in that bar environment and what that public space represents.
And are you staging it on that 35th floor in the cocktail bar up there?
That is the plan.
That's where we plan to premiere it. But the idea, and again, this is the generosity of this program that the Sofitel have, both with visual artists, or in our case as performing artists. We have an expectation that we create either an exhibition or a performance. But then all the intellectual property, all the work is ours, and we would certainly, this would be something we would be aiming to take and
on the road,
and we feel that if that bar, as you would know, is probably going to be the most difficult space for us
because it goes around the corner,
but because it's an atrium.
What an incredible
phenomenal space.
But that's a challenge,
huge,
isn't it? The fact that and you have to adapt it on a few levels. That I think is a plus in a way.
It throws up more challenges than the average bar will throw at us. From space to lighting to sound to the relationship to the public.
And will people, and I did ask this question because I arrived a little bit late, will the general public that are in the bar, will they know that it's a special performance? Is that the idea of it? Or are you just going to sort of walk up and let innocent people sitting there and their day's ruined because this actor...
It won't be ruined. He's very charming.
No, I mean, I think part of the appeal is that it is kind of immersive in a sense that... it's not like an actor on a stage. It is a little bit more hidden and mysterious than that. But of course, as part of advertising the show and just so that we're not kind of ruining anybody's day, people will know that a performance is taking place, but they might not expect it from the man behind the bar.
Yeah.
Also, just we can't do that in today's world. We have to have warnings, so we have to give people consent to be there.
Yeah.
So even for the Sofitel, it would be necessary, even if it was just a sign at the entrance that says a performance in progress.
Yep.
If you cross that threshold, you've given consent to be part of that.
But how exciting, for both of you, on different levels, and exciting for the Sofitel as well, that, something like this is going to be created in their, very, very famous cocktail bar. For anyone that hasn't been there, on the 35th floor, and when you're up there, you've got to go to the toilets. The view from the toilets are spectacular.
Yeah,
and
we almost need a scene in the toilets.
You do, although that's a bit hard. But I actually take visitors to Melbourne up there as part of their tourist route with me, because it's so spectacular. What a great challenge.
Yeah, it is a big challenge, and I think both of us are probably a bit afraid at the moment. It's always that point, and I think that's always a good thing. Ariane used to speak about this sacred fear that the artist, the actor, needs to maintain in a sense of the gods of theatre, whatever they may be, but that keeps us humble. Therefore, that keeps our senses more alert. That keeps us questioning. That keeps us questioning our own work. That we're never complacent. That keeps us on our toes. And I think that place where we're both a bit uncertain as to how this is going to evolve, but we're giving ourselves a deadline, and that we're aiming to tied into the Melbourne Fringe, so that's October. For a devised work, that is actually quite soon. So that adds another pressure to us.
But it's still exciting. To me, I'm excited for you, and excited as somebody that will come along and see it. I can't wait to see the journey that it's going to take.
And I think what's exciting, which we spoke about at the talk, is because of this work's capacity to move into other bars, whether they're in festivals. So every festival has like an artist bar or a festival bar. So tying it in. So we see it as a pre-show or post-show show, because in any bar we can't occupy the bar in a time when the bar is most busy. So we need to tie it into almost a guest experience that actually facilitates, like as though they brought in a jazz players in their happy hour, so it actually works for all parties in a way, but that it offers us as artists the opportunity that rather when you create a work, often that work is created and now it has its form, and you just move it and shove it into different spaces, whether the space really works for it or not. It just gets thrown in there. But
then that forces us to adapt and change and manipulate.
And
that's
work,
exciting.
So this work does the opposite. We will be adapting. We have to adapt. It's the space that dominates us, not us dominating the space.
And have you come up with a name yet, or is it too early?
We had to for the Fringe application. So we do have a tentative.
But you don't want to say what it is yet, or not?
Oh, we can. It's tentative. Well, there's a very famous one of the early texts written, probably one of the first cocktail texts written by a bartender, Harry Craddock from the American bar in the Savoy, and he put out which is still quite referred to and influential amongst the craft cocktail world, which is like enormously burgeoning at the moment. And so he has this book, and in it was kind of notes.
It was tips.
Oh, tips.
Tips for a young mixer.
Tips for a young mixer.
So we've kind of
we're riffing on that as kind of recipes, but we were going the art of tasting, leaving it a bit abstract. Could be a cooking show. The art of tasting in terms of tasting notes, because whether that's in wine, alcohol, cocktails, whiskey. That's our. Anyway, that's our little riff at the moment.
Well,
recipes from a young mixer.
That's brilliant. I love the concept, and can't wait to see it, as I said earlier. So thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you,
David. Very much for having us.
Thank you.
I'm David Hunt. You've been watching The Art Hunter, and we'll see you again next week. See ya.